thank everybody for gathering tonight so that we can learn a little bit more about the menorah for those of y'all that have already joined us. So just indulge me for a minute if you have already heard this, but I am going to just give you a little bit of information about our Let There Be Light menorah project. As you will learn over the next about 30-45 minutes, the 7-branch menorah is one of the most enduring symbols of the Jewish people. And our beautiful Behringer sanctuary has a lot of wonderful things. We have beautiful stained glass windows. We have the beautiful 10 Commandments and the Jerusalem stone on our bima, but we do not have a menorah. Most sanctuaries do have one. And so we have embarked on a project to help beautify our sanctuary. And we are putting in 2 glass mosaic tile menorahs that are glass tile representations of Ben Shon menorahs. And you've probably seen pictures of them in the collateral that was sent out to you by mail and also on email. And I think Rabbi Weinberg found the picture in a Haggadah that he had used growing up, and just really loved the image, and it works very nicely with the coloring also in our sanctuary. So these are going to be hung pretty soon, and they're going to be really beautiful. So this project serves multiple purposes, and the first and most important purpose is that it brings us together as a community. This has obviously been a very crazy year, and we are not able to gather in person, but we are able to gather together for education sessions like this. And then the second is that this is our only significant fundraising project for the past 2 years. So I just want to say that if you've already donated, we thank you, and we are very grateful for the congregation is very grateful. And if you have not yet participated, but you would like to, please go on the Anshai Torah website. I'd also like to really quickly recognize the members of this committee, Debbie Rajanov, Jeanette Pincus, Nancy Stanley, Marcy Kahn, and of course our very own Talia Kushnick, and you're about to learn from her tonight. And I just wanted to say that it's really been a pleasure working with everybody on this project. So I will turn it over now to you.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, I definitely want to second that. It's been great working on this committee and being part of this project. A lot of fun, and also just for me personally, just a real honor to be part of something so important for our shul. And it's also been really a fun experience for me for 2 reasons. One, I've been able to learn with people from our community that I haven't seen in a really long time. So it's nice to be connecting with you in this new way that we're connecting with each other, and also learning together. And just in general, it's really something that I love about Judaism and Jewish learning is to take something that I'm familiar with and know something about, but learn about it on a totally new level. And doing the research for these education sessions, and learning with you has really helped me to do that. Because for me, the menorah has always been something that I've kind of taken for granted. It's a symbol that's just very much a part of our Jewish tradition, but I didn't really know so much about it. It was just kind of always there. And so to be able to do this, to really delve deeply into something that is so familiar to me, and I know to a lot of us, has been just a really unique opportunity. So I've been, it's been just wonderful for me to be able to share that with you, hear your questions, hear your feedback. And tonight is actually our last education session. So I'm excited to be doing this again with you tonight. And for those of you who have been to the People of the Menorah session, you'll some of this will, I think they kind of work well together, because the menorah has such a rich history and so much significance to us as a people and to our tradition, that just learning as much as we can from these scholars that have made it their life's work to study the menorah has just been really, really fun, really cool. So before we really kind of delve into talking about the menorah, I want to just to really make sure that we're on the same page and knowing what we're talking about. So I'm going to share my screen. And so we see here in front of us two images. On the left-hand side, we have the biblical menorah. So this is the menorah that God designed and described to Moses, to Moshe, for him to build, to be part of the tabernacle. It's 7 branches, one in the middle with 6 coming out on each side. This menorah, we are first introduced to it in the Torah. We will learn about that in a few minutes. And then it becomes like a really big part of the tabernacle and then the temple rituals. So it sits in both the first and second temple. On the right-hand side, we have the Chanukiah, or the Hanukkah Menorah. When we talk about the Chanukiah, we tend to use these terms interchangeably. Chanukiah, menorah, they're both totally accurate. A menorah is a candelabra. But since we tend to refer to a Chanukiah sometimes as a menorah, I wanted to make sure that we could just clarify what we're going to be talking about tonight. The Chanukiah, as we know, has 9 branches, the shamash, and then the 8 for the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And that differs from the 7-branched menorah, which is the focus of what we're going to be talking about tonight. We at Anshai Torah are really very lucky because we already have a beautiful Chanukiah in the front of our shul, which not so long ago we gathered together to light it for Hanukkah. I don't know if it feels like a long time ago or it doesn't feel like a long time ago. I can't like wrap my mind around time, but it really wasn't so long ago. And that we have that already. So now as a shul, we are adding menorahs to our sanctuary. So we are very lucky to be able to have both of these beautiful things adorning our sacred spaces. So I want to go back to really looking at when we're first introduced to the menorah and talk a bit about it. So we're going to look at it in a minute. We're going to look at the text from the book of Exodus. It's a real imposing block of text. We're not going to get into it, but I more just want you to see, what it is that we're dealing with. Because when God gave the directive to build the tabernacle, there was a lot of very detailed instruction about the things that were going to go inside of it, down to the most minute detail of what these artifacts should look like. So let's look at this for a minute so you can see what I'm referring to. What happened here? Sorry. There we go. Okay, so here we have the block of text that I was talking about from the Torah, from the book of Exodus. It's 9 verses. If we were to read it, it kind of makes your head spin a little bit because, at least for me, I'm not artistic, and reading this and going through it, I can't really keep up with it, and I'm definitely not the only one. So Dr. Stephen Fine, who if you were at the People of the Menorah, we spent a lot of time with him, but he is really kind of the preeminent scholar living right now of the Menorah. He has spent his life studying this artifact, its history, its significance in our tradition, and it's really incredible the wealth of knowledge that he has about this one thing. But in his doctoral classes, he asks his students to read the text from the Torah and to draw the menorah. It's a seemingly simple task, but he describes in one of his books kind of the hilarious scene that takes place in his classroom when he does this. Just these people getting so frustrated, really just the same as when I read it. Like their mind just can't follow it. They can't keep going with it. And it's so detailed and it's confusing. And so I'm confused by it. Dr. Fine's students are confused by it. And Moses was also confused by it. So he's given these instructions. He's given this kind of description of something that he needs to build, and he cannot do it. He can't follow it. And so he enlists the help of the artist Bezalel to create this artifact. And Bezalel does create it, and it then sits in the tabernacle. But one piece of the description, we're going to look at it again, is very clear, and that is verse 37, where it says, "And thou shalt make the lamps thereof 7." So, if you want to read this on your own time, feel free to do it. It might make your head spin, but something you'll walk away with is that no matter what we can visualize, there need to be 7 branches of this menorah. So that part is very clear. And the question is really why? Why is it that the number 7 stands out to us here? So if we think about kind of our Jewish tradition, there are numbers that hold a lot of significance for us. The number 7 is an example. The number 18, Chai, is another example. And then there's this thing called gematria, which has been used for centuries, and we assign a numerical value to each Hebrew letter. And people use this to kind of find deeper meaning to the text. So if Aleph is 1 and Bet is 2, you can take words and take their gematria, their numerical value, add it together and find an even deeper meaning than what you might see on the surface level. So numbers really do have a significance in our Jewish tradition. And the number 7 is extremely significant. We're going to spend a lot of time tonight really looking at why that is. So we're going to read a source together about the number 7 and what it is about it that is so significant. I will read it. It says, "Often we see the number 7 in reference to holy works of God. God creates the earth in 7 days. He commands the Israelites to make the 7th day of the week Shabbat, a holy day filled with no working activities. 7 tends to represent something that is being finished or complete. Hence, God's creation was complete on the 7th day. It also tends to represent divine perfection." So here we're seeing a number of reasons why the number 7 has this significance in the Jewish tradition. And it's kind of, this mystical understanding of this number, this idea of perfection, of something being complete, of, kind of God's hand in something. And she's giving some real examples here that we can see kind of in our day-to-day Jewish life that are really pointing to the number 7 having this kind of elevated significance. And so we have a few examples here, but I'd like to hear from you because there are so many examples. And if you just start thinking a little bit about our Jewish tradition, our rituals, I think you'll realize, wow, this is 7, this is 7, this is 7. So if anybody wants to share, if you can think of anything, feel free to raise your hand or just put it in the chat. Places where we see the number 7 come up in the Jewish tradition.
7 Sheva Bracha when you get married.
7 Sheva Brachot, and Sheva is the number 7. So we have 7 blessings that we say under the chuppah when somebody is getting married, and then traditionally people might have 7 nights of celebration after their wedding, which we also call the Sheva Brachot. If we're going to have a Sheva Brachot, and we say them again there. So yeah, 3 patriarchs, 4 matriarchs. There we go. That's another number 7. That's a great example. That's one I haven't even thought about yet.
Sitting Shiva.
Sitting Shiva. Yes, Shiva is another way to say 7. So yeah, we have sitting Shiva. These are great ones. What else can you guys come up with? Nadav, my son Nadav wants to share, but he needs to come over here and not just say it from like half the way across the house.
When there's a wedding, the bride spins around the room 7 times.
Yes, did you hear him? Can you say it loudly?
When there's a wedding, the bride spins around the room 7 times.
Exactly, that's another example. Thank you, love. So the bride will traditionally circle the groom 7 times, either before they go under the chuppah or immediately after they have entered it. Any others?
I think so many of our holidays are 7 days.
Yes, yes. You guys are touching on a lot of them. I want to share some that I have found. So here we have some examples. So the first verse of the Torah has 7 words, right? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So that's how we kick off the Torah already with the number 7. We have Shabbat that falls on the 7th day of the week, and there are 7 aliyot, so 7 people are called to the Torah on Shabbat. So on other holidays, like on a Yom Tov or on Yom Kippur or weekday Torah readings, it's not 7 people, it's 6 or 3 or 5, but on Shabbat, it's 7 people. There are 7 laws called the Noahide laws that apply to all of humanity. Deb, like you were saying, Passover and Sukkot are celebrated for 7 days in the Torah and currently in Israel. So outside of Israel, we celebrate them for 8 days, but in Israel, those are celebrated for 7 days. Again, like you were saying, we sit Shiva for 7 days, and that word literally means 7. And there are 7 major Jewish holidays throughout the year: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Hanukkah, Purim, Passover, and Shavuot. At a wedding, like Nadav was saying, the bride will traditionally circle the groom 7 times. And then we also have the Sheva Brachot that we say under the chuppah and then following the ceremony. And in Israel, 7 species are produced: wheat, barley, grapes, pomegranates, figs, olives, and dates. So we can see, and these, I don't have, some of the ones that you shared aren't even on my list. So we can see that there is a real history here and a real significance to the number 7 within our tradition. And if you were, when I was making that list, I didn't include all the things that I had. I really wanted to include just the highlights. So there are so many things, so many examples of the number 7 kind of popping up. And then we have it again here in the menorah, one of our most recognizable symbols, specifically in the directive that we get from God, having 7 branches. So, there are definitely, these are things that we can recognize in our daily lives or in our yearly lives through the cycle as Jews, right? We see the number 7. But, kind of going back to what we read in that text about 7 having this more, mystical, deeper kind of meaning, that it represents so much more. And there are lots of different kinds of ways that we can understand what the number 7 means to our tradition, and specifically to read it onto the menorah and what that could be. So we're going to read about a little bit of a more abstract example now, and this is coming from Stephen Fine, who I talked about earlier. I'm going to share my screen again. So this is a cosmic understanding of the 7 branches. So he writes, the biblical description of the tabernacle menorah is indeed difficult to conceptualize. Each element of this complex artifact is open to interpretation, and attempts to visualize the original artifacts can be perplexing. Philo in the 1st century, Josephus in the 1st century, and then Yanai the poet in the 5th century opted for an astrological interpretation. Ancients had a profound awareness that God is watching us from a distance. The menorah represented this connection. So this is new, right? This is different because we can kind of understand, if this is something that that God is directing us, right? 7 branches. We can understand that this is a work of God. This might, in designing it, there might have been ideas of, increasing the holiness of it, increasing the idea of completion, of perfection, and asking for the number 7 specifically to kind of further that idea. But now we have a totally new thing coming in. And what does this mean? What is Fine talking about that some of these ancient thinkers were saying God is watching us from a distance, and that this has something to do with our menorah. So can anyone take a guess, or does anybody have any idea maybe what they were thinking, what this could possibly be alluding to? You can raise a hand or put it in the chat. And what is the connection between the menorah and astrology, astronomy? Like what is the connection? It's a tough one. It's a tough one. So we're going to unpack it now. So we're going to look at some of these thinkers that we were just talking about and kind of try to understand what it is that they're saying. So this is the Prophet Zechariah, and this is, written in the book of Zechariah. Shiva Ela Einei Adonai Hema Mishtotatim B'chol Haaretz. These seven are the eyes of God, which range through the whole earth. So this is Zechariah's way of kind of unpacking this for us and helping us understand what he was talking about, what he was meaning when he was connecting the menorah to these eyes of, to God is watching us, right? The eyes of God. So we know that ancient civilizations studied the stars and the skies, and they paid close attention to everything that was going on, where things were moving. And of course, they related it to their world and their understanding and their religious traditions. So when they were looking up at the sky, they were seeing seven eyes of God. And somehow that was then being related to the menorah that was sitting in the tabernacle, that was sitting in the first temple, that was sitting in the second temple. So this is our number seven, right? That we're still talking about here. And what is it about it that, what is this connection? So we have to wait for Yanai, the poet Yanai, to make it very explicit for us. And he says, Menorat Shiva Nerot Mata Nidmu L'Shiva Mazlot Mala. The seven lamps of the menorah below are like the seven constellations, planets above. So in this image here, we see the seven classical planets. So they're not necessarily planets, that was what they were called. They're celestial bodies, and the celestial bodies that are visible to the naked eye, okay? So there are seven of them that we can see. And there was kind of this understanding that these seven that were going throughout the world, throughout the skies that we were looking up at, were the eyes of God, and they were watching us. God was watching us all the time. And to bring that understanding kind of into our holy spaces and into our tabernacle, the place, and then where we worshiped, in the temples, people read that understanding onto the seven-branched menorah, because you would walk into this space and there would be the menorah and there was God watching you. So now we understand kind of this connection and what Fine is saying about God is watching us from a distance, and then bringing that into God is watching us in our holy spaces. So we see this connection now between the seven and the seven branches of the menorah and the seven classical planets, the constellations. And for us now, this is our menorah that we are going to be hanging up. It's going to look very beautiful when we have all the shiny glass pieces, and I'm really excited to see it, and I know we'll all be super excited when we can put it up and see it in person. But if we think about kind of the words that adorn our sanctuary right now, on the Aron, on the Ark, it says, Dalifne miata omed, know who you're standing in front of. So we already kind of have this idea that God is in our holy space. God is watching us, and it's for us to kind of take that in, embody that, and kind of use that to get into the right maybe headspace, to know that God is part of that prayer, right? God is part of that space. And we're increasing that idea by putting these two menorahs. So flanking each side of the Aron with now two menorahs. So we have just that much more of a reminder that when we are walking into that space to pray, to be with each other, to connect in this way, that we are walking into a space that is truly godly, and we are entering into this relationship. We come in and God is there watching us. God is meeting us there. And that is why I think, you know, and in the people of the menorah, I hope that some of you were able to be part of that. We talked about the history of the menorah, how the menorah has always kind of been there. What I said a lot of times in that session is where there are Jews, there are menorahs throughout history. And there's a reason why menorahs were traditionally placed in sanctuaries. We talked about some of those reasons in the people of the menorah, but this is another reason altogether. Because when we walk into a sanctuary, when we open ourselves up to prayer, we are entering into a relationship with God. We are bringing ourselves there, and God is bringing God's self to us. And this is just another example of that, another way for us to remind ourselves of that relationship that we have. So with that, I would like to open it up to any questions that anybody has. Please feel free to either raise your hand or put it in the chat. Okay, if we don't have any questions, then I will hand it over to Julia.
Just wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight. And again, if you have not yet donated, there is more information online, and we just want to thank everybody that has. And we hope you enjoyed. This was our last education session, so hopefully soon we will be able to dedicate these in the sanctuary. Hope everyone has a good evening.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you. Nadav, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
lesson.
It was
Very nice.
wonderful.
Nadav,